Welcome to the Contemporary South Asia podcast, the audio companion to the journal Contemporary South Asia, published by Taylor and Francis. In each episode, we engage with scholarship that examines the politics, societies, and cultures of South Asia in their global and historical contexts. Through conversations with authors and experts, we highlight key debates, emerging research, and critical perspectives that shape understandings of the region today. Our aim in doing so is to extend the dialogue beyond the page, opening the journal's work to a wider audience of scholars, students, and interested listeners. My name is Dr. Thomas Chambers. I'm an Associate Professor of Social Anthropology at Oxford Brookes University and the editor of Contemporary South Asia. Please note that today's podcast comes with a content notice. The episode will include discussions of suicide and self-harm. Today's guest is Dr. Dhaneswar Bhoi. Dhaneswar is an honorary fellow in sociology at the University of Edinburgh, where he also completed his postdoctoral research in South Asian studies. He recently served as lecturer and module leader in social psychology and applied social research at the London School of Science and Technology, affiliated with the University of West London. Dr. Bhoi holds a certificate in Introduction to Psychology from the University of Oxford and a postgraduate certificate in Teaching and Learning in Higher Education from the University of London. He is also a Fellow of the Advanced Higher Education Institute. Dr. Bhoi is actively engaged in scholarly research and academic leadership. He serves as Associate Editor of Caste, a journal of social exclusion, which is published from Brandeis University in the USA, and is a member of the editorial board of Social Inclusion, published from Lisbon. His research explores caste, mental health, affect, and social exclusion within higher education. He's published in academic journals and is also the co-editor of a book titled Caste in Everyday Life, Experience and Affect in Indian Society, published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2023. Today we'll be discussing Dhaneswar's article, Caste, Mental Health and Self-Harm, Emotive Experiences of Dalit Students at the Indian University, that was published in Contemporary South Asia on the 13th of August 2025. Dhaneswar Bhoi, welcome to the Contemporary South Asia podcast.
Thank you.
Dhaneswar, we're going to be discussing your article, Caste, Mental Health and Self-Harm, Emotive Experiences of Dalit Students at the Indian University. And here you're taking us to a sort of public university in Odisha and, drawing on kind of research you've conducted amongst students on the campus. But I wonder, before we sort of get into some of the detail here, Dhaneswar, I'm conscious that we may have a listenership who perhaps, are wider than the South Asian context and may, be sort of regionally engaged with other parts of the world. For those perhaps who are not so familiar with South Asia or with the Indian context, could you give a little bit of a sense of what it means to be Dalit in India?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tom. It was my pleasure to be participating in this podcast. So before starting our podcast, I would like to start the concept of Dalit. Dalit is literally means those who are oppressed, which was used for the untouchable people. It was started in 1800th century by the Jyotiba Phule, and later on Ambedkar used as a depressed class. And formally in 1970s, people used in a positive sense from the lower caste background. They united with the banner of Dalit, and they claimed their rights connecting to the constitutional safeguards and how they claim their rights and spaces in the society. So almost 166 million people are living in India, those who are Dalit, but constitutionally it is called scheduled caste.
So I mean, for anyone who's not familiar with the particular sort of concept, we're talking about people who have historically been very marginalized within, kind of the caste dynamics of South Asia, India particularly, but also elsewhere. And and in a sort of sense, this is where we're sort of beginning, huh? So we have this, sort of context which will be comparable, of course, to forms of marginalization within higher education in other parts of the world, but it's a particular kind of intersection, I guess, where we're kind of examining in this particular space. Dinesh, your article, shows how sort of caste discrimination then in an Indian public university at Odisha shapes Dalit students' everyday emotions, their mental health, and in some cases perhaps even pushes them towards self-harm and potentially, suicidal ideation or even suicide. So you introduce here the idea of unseeability as a sort of powerful way to think about how Dalit students are rendered invisible in campus life. I wonder if you could, kind of expand a little bit on this idea of unseeability for us, just to sort of set the scene as well. What's this university like spatially? How is it kind of configured, and how does that sort of unseeability sort of come into play?
Yeah, thank you very much. The concept of unseeability, when I was working on this concept along with my supervisor and all, so we are just thinking some communities in India, especially in Eastern India, Odisha. So we have graded hierarchy within the caste systems. Among Dalits, there are few students or few percent of the people. In my study, they are 23%, and they face unseeability. Like people are not happy to see them, so they are unseeable people. If someone see them before starting any work or going to school, going to colleges, going to exam, so it is treated as that they are inauspicious. The Dalits are inauspicious. So in that sense, the Dalit were put into a stigma that they should not appear in front of upper caste when they're starting their day. So that is a new study which we have some theories on untouchability, which is based on the touching others. Dalits are not allowed to touch others, and others are also not allowed to touch Dalits. But similarly, so we found a different concept, different theories, which is surrounded to Dalits are not treated to be appear in front of others, or they should not be visible to others. And that sense, which I saw in my study area, where the students from the upper caste, when they're going to appear the exams, like class exams or different modules exams, so they threaten the Dalit students. You will not appear specifically in the morning when they are going to exam, because if they see the lit students and their exam will not go well, they give the questions before that. Like suppose their exam is scheduled on 15th of February, before 1 or 2 weeks they give a question, verbal question to the Dalits, either with any staffs there or to any peoples, those who can convey that message, they should not be appeared in front of the upper students. So that is significantly very traumatic and very stigmatized, and which later on I added at a sixth varna. Like in the caste hierarchy, we are up to fifth varna. The fifth varna are the untouchable, those who are untouched at the bottom of the caste system. But when I was doing this study and after getting the findings, so we are just concluding. So there is additional varna called sixth varna. They are unseeable.
So yeah, I mean that's really fascinating. This sort of introduction then of this sort of notion of unseeability, and you talk then about how this kind of feeds through into quite profound kind of psychological consequences amongst students. And here, you kind of make the point that this really hasn't been particularly well explored in terms of kind of educate sort of literature in universities, but also very importantly literature on kind of mental health more generally. I wonder if you could talk then a little bit about how you sort of connect this to that kind of sort of different discussions and
Yeah.
literatures around mental health in higher education.
Yeah. So education supposedly to be the egalitarian space. Specifically after the constitution we have, constitution gave the rights to be treated equally and not to be discriminated. But in practice, that is not still happening. There are some scholars who argue So the caste is the things of past. It's not, at least in educational space. But in my argument, I found the caste is very much existing, and not it is only in physical spaces or doing some actions. It is embedded through a mental space, mental lens, where it was propagated, it was strategized to harass the students so that they can leave the educational spaces. So they intentionally do it. In my PhD, so I have specific chapter for caste and psychosocial consequence of other students, which is built on the argument of Sidhu, a concept which earlier given by Gopal Guru and a few other scholars. But the Sidhu is derived from the scheduled caste. The Dalit, the constitutional name of the Dalit is scheduled caste. When they used to get any scholarship, any government facilities from the university social, starting from the lecturer, starting from the academic staff, or any clerical staffs, or any staffs in the university, they used to branded these people as Sidhu or Kota wala. Kota means some reserved category students or reserved on the basis of their caste. And this derogatory term sometimes they also used by uttering their caste name or subcaste name as students of caste or researcher of caste. I find it the term is intentionally used to make them or brand them that they are quota people, they are non-meritorious, they used to get all the benefits. So it was uttered against them in the every places, starting from any clerical counter or any academic support counter to the university spaces, which built on there that you are inferior, you are Dalit, you are supposed to get some benefits from government, you should not compete with the other upper caste students. So that traumatized them not to participate in academic, curricular, co-curricular activities. And they make it intentional. Suppose some students were treated as unseeable and some caution was given to them in a prior notice, and they they are not thinking about their study, the Dalit students. They are not thinking about their performance, how they will perform. They are thinking about how to escape from the other caste connotations which were made to them, and they are thinking about the threat and or consequences if they appear by chance in front of an upper caste, what will happen to them, how they will escape from that situations. That thought creating their mental issues. They are not thinking about that study. They're thinking about how to tackle, how to deal with the social situations, which is imposing them that the Dalits are inferior and they are not supposed to appear in the place or the hostel places. And importantly, the the space which is waiting for the Dalits in the university space. So they do not only create some social perceptions which is non-meritorious. They are not only branding them as unseeable, unteachable. They are also trying to do something that their scholarship or fellowship which they are getting from the government should be delayed or not to reach them, and that create some traumatized situation for the Dalits when they are not getting their fellowship for long, 6 months, 8 months, for a year. So financially they are weak. They are not able to continue their study. That is one factor. Another factor, the psychological bombard against them, psychological term used on the basis of the caste, psychological discriminations they are facing. Even they want to participate in cultural activity, they are not allowed to do. And there are some cultural activities like Saraswati Puja, that is the event which is organized or celebrated in the university to worship some Hindu idols during that time. So Dalits were not allowed to enter the pujas places, not allowed to offering flower to the god or goddesses. That create a psychological traumatized situations, and sometimes intentionally the Dalit students were failed in their academic work activities or behaviours exams. So that leads to a situation where Dalit thought about their suicide, or they're thinking about to drop the course. So these are the major challenges which is surrounding the Dalits when they are in university phase. They're supposed to think and engage in academic activity, rather they're challenging and dealing with the social challenges which they are facing from the university, starting from the staffs, academic staffs or academic support staffs, to lecturers, to the peers or any of the other group
So,
students.
so I mean, this is fascinating, and really profoundly kind of you know you can feel the kind of level of distress that students must feel. I mean, we're talking here not about just structural violence or just and not that that should be a just, but we're not talking only about structural violence or only about kind of institutional bias or more sort of subtle forms of exclusion and marginalization. Actually, a lot of these things are really overt, right, and spatially kind of configured in particular ways. And you touched, of course, there on the really difficult issue of suicide. And you started to talk a little bit about how this pushes some students to certainly consider it, and in fact, you situate the article, against the background of some quite high profile Dalit student suicides that have taken place, have been kind of fairly widely reported in the Indian media and so on.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could just give us, a little bit more, and this is perhaps the most difficult bit of the conversation, I guess, a little bit more of a kind of sense of, just how, deeply and profoundly distressing that can be, to result in that kind of level of act, perhaps.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I wonder if you could just expand a little bit further then on the kind of dynamics around suicide, and whether that be suicidal ideation or in fact, in some of the cases you cite in your paper, actual suicide, and just give us a little bit of a sense of the sort of dynamics around that from your research as well.
Yeah. Connecting to self-harm or suicide, Dalit students were discriminated on the basis of their caste and their social status. Dalit always stated they should not be in the educational spaces. They are in the society. They should the upper caste. What is their perception about the Dalit? They should not share the academic space or educational space. Rather than they just maintain their livelihood and earning something and have their life in the society than entering to the higher educations. So when we have 12th five-year plan, so there was some provision how we should include the students to the higher education space, but it was not accepted practically grounded level in the society, even if educational spaces. But the number of the students through 12th five-year plan of India, which allow us the students to entry into the education system. But if I'll give one example, so one of my uh, study case study students who was living in a hostel. So and initially when the hostel list announced his name along with some upper caste students, like the room was shared by two peoples, and when the upper caste heard that there is another students in their room who is from the Dalit community, immediately the FOCA student make complaint to the university and they change the list, and also they threaten the Dalit students, how come you are in this hostel room sharing with me, so you should not supposed to share the room with me. And also, I also saw when I was there in a hostel. So I was also in every hostel, they have a reading room and also a common room where they can dine. And there is some TV and other instruments were there. So one Dalit students was reading a newspaper. A group of focus students came, and there are different newspapers like Times of India, The Hindu, and different other newspapers. But in that day, the students just reading Hindu newspaper. Then some of our students came. How dare you to read this Hindu newspaper? This not for you. So you came here to getting some benefit from the government. You should study. So this reading space is not yours. You should not read this newspaper. This not the newspaper, and scolded the Dalit students in caste names and also threaten and harass him. So, as a part of that event, the Dalit student cried, and few other Dalit students joined with them. But with the power and dominance, they were not able to do anything because the political economy of Dalit students always rely on the upper caste because the Dalit students were the parents were basically landless laborers. They rely the upper caste to work in their agricultural field or any other works where they oppose things, so which was again negatively affect their parents' livelihood. So in that sense, the Dalit students cried, and I just try to console students. But when I try to console things, the group of upper caste students even threatened me, and also try to beaten me in that places. But somehow I escaped that place. But later on, what happened? Slowly, the Dalit students not coming to the class, and he was feared that is there any mistake done from him? But there was not such kind of mistake. A student studying in a educational space and reading room, accessing reading room, which was bonded with the power dominance of upper caste. So, and even if there, so they should wait first the upper caste students should read the newspaper, then maybe he can get a chance to read. But getting in the morning, early morning, having the newspaper in the very first instances was not allowed. So that situation, and later on some meeting happened with the hostel wardens and all. So I also informed some of the university admin. So they uh, conduct a meeting, but at the end there was nothing happen. Nothing happened, and the students was um, dropped the institution, and I connected the student because it was not a short period of time. It was mostly 2 years of study, and so when I reached in the next year, I listened from other students. He was not in the school due to that incident. Yeah. And there are some students who also even commit suicide due to the caste and caste embedded activities which was happening to them. As a consequences, they try to commit suicide, and when that appears, the upper caste students not coming to help. Even they hide themselves with the fear of legal actions maybe happen. So only the fellow Dalit students, they took them to the hospital, and fortunately some of the students survived. And it happened to many students, and few students also committed suicide. One of the case, I was there in the hostel. Then I heard that one Dalit students argued with one of the hostel warden, and they didn't punish the upper caste, but they punished the Dalit students for 15 days or 1 month suspensions. And during that time, uh, for some time, I was not in the university campus. So I had that Dalit students, due to their suspenses, committed suicide. And this was very traumatized for other Dalit students as well. It was very sad and disheartening. So why it is happening? So uh, the students, those who are appearing in that places, they try to resist the thing against the warden and university uh, authority, but ultimately the government and other kind of bureaucrats, they try to save the dominance power rather than marginalized students. Yeah. So nothing happened. It was still a sad story. So yeah. So in that process, the social and psychosocial things which is happening against the Dalits, intentionally they try to create problem for the Dalit students, either in academic space, in their academic performance, or they create issues in their hostel spaces and suspend the Dalit students, which leads their further consequences because their economic and social power is so low. So they came to the university with the hope of to learn, to get the degree and get occupational mobility so that their family can go ahead. But rather than getting any opportunities when they are suspended, that leads their suicidal tendency. So they're thinking what face they will show to their parents and what will happen to their parents with the burden of that. But indirectly or directly, so it is a result of caste which harass them, which push them towards the self-harm process.
I mean, this paper was based on some really substantive research conducted over quite longitudinal kind of period of time. I think
Yeah,
there's some 2 periods, 2014 to
yeah,
2016, and then again
yeah,
2020 to 23, which gave you both that sort of ability to kind of get a snapshot, but then also to sort of see how things connected over a more lengthy period. And your piece uses a quite substantive kind of mixed method kind of methodology involving questionnaires, involving in-depth case studies and focus groups and so on. But you also spend some time in the article, Daneshwar, talking about your own kind of positionality and how that's kind of
yeah,
did
yeah,
on the research as well. And I wonder if for listeners, if you could just tell us a little bit about that and how that's sort of been a part of the research journey in terms of this particular
yeah,
article.
yeah. I also belongs from the Dalit community. Particularly, I belongs to the Bauri caste. Uh, we have gradation where we come to the untouchability of Dalits who were not allowed to enter even the temples in my village. But we, as per our leader Ambedkar, so with him, so like his idea and connect us to the city. So then the symbolic capital which we gained through Ambedkar, so that helps me to avail the scholarships in my graduation. Then I did my post graduation, and when I was in the study, so my positionality was insider perspective, which helps me to reach or access to the Dalit student easily. And it also creates some challenges where the other upper caste were not happy with this process of research. They threaten me, even they threaten my life sometimes. They will do some things if you do something kind of things. And sometimes they discourage the students that do not give the data or other informations. But I had all the informations, all permissions from the university as well as the UGC, which helps me and to conduct the study. And to a personal note, when I was in the city and so to conduct the study, so I wanted to get a room in the city. Uh, but unfortunately, I paid the money and everything to have a room rent for that. But when they know my caste status, they denied. Even they didn't return my money. So whatever I gave in advance, and so they told me, so why you did not told us in the very first instances you are from a Dalit community. So later on, I stayed in hotel. So everyday payment was very costly for me, but I tried to manage. And I was also in the university in one of the instances, I saw a few Dalit students were watching a cricket match in the uh, university stadium, and they're not allowed to sit in the front row because there are some row which not technically but socially reserved for the upper caste. They think so. The seat is for upper caste, so you should not be uh, seated in the front. So I met few students there. So they were beaten by the upper caste and they're crying. So why it is happening? Because they were sitting in the front and watching the cricket match. So it was really pathetic. And so wherever I uh, have opportunity, I try to resolve the things and also try to fix the things which was in my capacity, but which is not in my capacity. Also, I try to resolve through the university and other officials, but it was challenging for me uh, to collect data because there was rumor that there was some person from the Dalit community who's trying to get their own experiences. That experiences may create bad consequences for the university as well as from other peoples. But I managed, and when I submitted my thesis, even one of my evaluators uh, so challenge that findings, then I said you have every right and you can just reject. Maybe you can send our thesis to other supervisor, other evaluators. But finally, he approved. And but in between there was some conversation. So these are my positionality. And when you are saying some truth and naked truth, so others are not accepted that. That is one kind of things. And but through this research, I have also recommended few things for the government to introduce anti-discrimination law other than the constitutions, which it's clearly argued that those who are engaged in this discrimination process are creating problems for the students. So there should be strong law and some punishment system for those who are engaged in this process. Finally, we have one anti-discrimination law or equality law, but not exactly law. It was a regulation from the UGC. Later on, the focus challenge and protest against this, that this may be misused, and this is held by Supreme Court now until 17th March. So we are waiting to hear what is the state of the Supreme Court now. But this is the story as a insider perspectives to pitch into the research and produce this story. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. You've spoken a few times there about kind of pushback, I suppose we can say. I mean, in some cases, quite extreme pushback from higher caste students and other groups. Sort of against both your research, but also more generally against sort of anti-discrimination laws and so on and so on, and reservations for that matter. And this is something we've seen emerge in really across India in all sorts of different
Yeah.
locations and localities where there has been this kind of I guess we can't even call it a social movement, right? It's kind of movement amongst certain upper caste groups to sort of protest, laws that are designed or sort of at least contextually designed to sort of provide processes of positive discrimination, as they might be called in other parts of the world, or reservations, as I referred to in India, and so on. And the claim there very much being, I guess, this idea that these reservations are um, discriminatory to upper castes, right, who don't have access to them. Is it in that case sort of flipping, I suppose, this sort of dynamic. But you also there mentioned, of course, Ambedkar, and Ambedkar's sort of role as a profound sort of influence on yourself and of course on the Dalit sort of communities across India more generally as well. And in fact, you draw on Ambedkar's scholarship quite specifically in the article, particularly around notions of caste as a state of mind, and this is something more than just
Yeah.
a sort of structural process that really ingrains itself deeply into one's psyche and all these sorts of things. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about Ambedkar's work in that regard.
Yeah. So actually, we admire Ambedkar as an icon and emancipatory person. So few scholars also argued he is also emancipator and uh, make the people to come out from the misery. So he not only work on academically and also he wrote the constitutions and was the chairman of drafting committee of constitutions, Indian constitutions. So the symbol of Ambedkar is not only a just mere picture to Indian nations, but he lives in every Dalit or every Indians as emancipator and his struggle to get into the education and finally studied in overseas, Columbia University, LAC, and finally drafted the constitution that inspired and united people. So in his name, we have different student organizations. I remember when I was a child. So when I listen that there is some program going on Ambedkar's name, even I walk till 40 kilometers to reach that places. So walking 40 kilometers, it was a business of 6 hours or something. So that name symbolizes how powerful that person is, and with the name of Ambedkar, there are organizations that people claim the education and claim the social mobility. If you see the second generations or maybe the first generation, those who are coming through the higher education, it was only because of Ambedkar and due to the constitutional provisions or constitutional safeguarding. So through reservations, some of the peoples came into the government jobs and that allow further the other Dalits or other generations to establish themselves in education and claim their right. Other than Ambedkar's, the Dalits are only like landless laborer and low bottom of the people who are only relying on the others' mercy because historically they are marginalized. They have very less land or no lands, and that's is also called as cultural capital or social capital, which Dalits lacks for long. And Constitution and Ambedkar is the only social and cultural capital for the Dalits, or I can say he is the symbolic capital for all of us, which bring the people till here. Even for me, he he gave a pathway, and through his designed model of scholarship and educational capital helps me to reach these places like to studying here. So I admire. So his role to emancipating them is really impactful, and his way is education medium. Through education, he claims that we will close to the equality, and that's why it will take time. It will not one day affair. So definitely, if you see almost all part of India where Ambedkar is celebrated not only just as a symbol, but as a emancipatory icon, as a capital which bring the people to art and education and achieve social mobility.
So I mean, you draw on Ambedkar's, kind of classical work here, of course, but you also draw on sort of more, contemporary kind of literatures as well to sort of frame, the context you're working with. Particularly, you already mentioned Gopal Guru and,
Yeah,
also Jolie. I think you use, to think about questions of humiliation, questions of
yeah,
disgust. And you also draw on your own work and Hugo Goringe's work to think about
yeah,
sort of affecta and these more
yeah.
affective aspects of caste. So I wonder if you could kind of expand a little bit on that kind of theoretical framing that you use in the article to kind of think through that kind of psychological level of impact, but also the sort of affective and emotive and embodied aspects that come into play.
Yeah. So once someone born in the Dalit family, if I go to Gopal Guru's work, So the space for the Dalit is limited due to its caste and contextual position connecting to access to the resource in the society. So, mm, but if I see the Ambedkar works, even if his own journey was a fight back journey, which really helps Dalits to fight back. So there are many Dalits who were struggle in caste and casted process, but few they challenge the caste system and finally succeeds. So this is the fight back effort, and if you see the work of Joel Lee and connecting to psychological things, the society impose the idea of disgust to the Dalits, where the Dalits have very less space to come out that stigma. And if you go to the Gopal Guru's humiliation, it is a mental scar, it is a mental marker, it is a mental um, point which is not giving you pain at the instance or uh, suppose you are hurted by some wound, physical wound, so that can be healed in 15 days or 7 days. But when you are wounded by a mental or psychological scar, which is perpetuated by the society or of a caste, so you'll take time to heal. Even there are some students they are not getting healed of that wound. So it is a mental scare. So it hurts every time you think about that, what happened to you. If I'll say some students were sitting in the hostel spaces of my study area, a few of our students came to him and snatched the, he was watching the TV, then the group of people, they snatched the remote and scolded. So that event is not ended that places, the Dalit student carry that things in the entire life, even if to not concentrating the education, not getting pass in their uh, modules, and even in their entire life. What happened to me? Why it happened to me? So this is basically a psychological things. Once something happened on the basis of caste, so it was not going beyond. And if I see our own work cast in everyday life experience and affect in that, so we try to argue that caste is embedded in every spaces of the life. It is everyday affairs, and it is performative. It's not static. It is not. A solid things. It's changing. Ambedkar also saying the same thing. Caste is changing, or it is performative things. And in that argument, we try to argue caste starts with the when the human burns for the Dalits, and even it lasts to the end when they are cremated or crematorial spaces. So every places the caste is strongly appear like omnipotent things, or it is appear in every spaces when there is some rituals from the bath to different places, and in a university also we have different cultural celebrations which is propagating caste. And in the death we have there are separate cremation ground for different caste groups. So one caste group cannot use the upper caste spaces to cremate the dead bodies and few other things. And even there are sometimes the Dalits are not allowed to take the dead bodies in the upper caste um, corridor, upper caste uh, roads, which in front of the upper caste, and sometimes they were not allowed to do things without the caste norm. So, and it's also why it is changing, because if we see the caste dynamics, which was uh, very much visible only to the boundary of untouchability, and now if you see the unseeability and the systematic caste propagation against Dalits because the space of education even was also Vedic time in literatures or religious scripts where Dalits were not allowed to read. And there are some incidents in the mythology, people call mythology, but there are also some stories, if you refer from the religious scripts, the Dalits, when they read Veda, some people put some metal, liquid metal to the Dalit face. So if you bring that story to the present context, so the society does not want Dalits to study or achieve the social mobility because they have a whole industry of caste hierarchical society where Dalits were born to serve and they cannot reach the education so that they can attend the higher occupations. So they systematically try to blockade Dalits and they also studied or they also planned which things allow them to attend educations. They don't have land, they don't have good occupation to get study, the only the government provisions or government scholarships, which is coming due to the constitutional provision. Again, it was Ambedkar's tremendous effort, which we are just trying to get into that process. When people try to stop that things, so ultimately the people will not survive in the higher education space. They need rent, they need some other educational expenses, books, and other things. So ultimately, they will leave the study. So if you just pick the Rohit Vemula case, so I was also engaging in the protest during that time, but what happened? So Rohit Vemula's story is only in the government file, so he did not get any justice. And the story happened that intentionally his fellowship was not released for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Continuously, they catch hold on the financial aspect where the lead can not go ahead. But Rohit and few other friends of Rohit, they agitated this, they protested this, but ultimately he committed suicide with a strong note which he wrote against the other those who are creating problem. But the strategy is financial block or financial hold to the Dalits has ultimately resulted to committing suicide. But it was a channel where the others know how to channelize the Dalits and make a hold and even drop them from the course or to put the psychological process they should commit suicides. So it is not only the Rohit story. In my university also, the people they committed suicide where I was doing the study. And later on, there are countless stories which is in higher education institutions, and the Dalit students committed suicide. So it is a process, mental process, which injected to the Dalits, where at the end Dalit committed suicide, and this is all casted process. And I was also arguing one of the seminar in UCL where the Dalits mm, should claim the educational place or not. So in the caste hierarchy, you see the gradation of caste starting from Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Atishudra, and now if I say the unseeable communities added to that Varna systems. So they demarcated some occupational space for Dalit. So coming out from that space and claiming equal space in the education is not tolerated by the upper caste. That mentality it is reflecting in various forms. Though we have constitutional safeguards, but we need a strong law which can stop the Dalit suicides in higher educations. And we need not only a legal law, it should be disappear or abolish from the mental layer of the upper caste or the social psyche, which putting Dalit into the self-harm process.
And you discuss, I suppose really a kind of almost a particular psychological condition that you identify as kind of emerging under these sorts of circumstances, which I think you term sort of the anxiety and panic
Yeah.
complex. Could you just sort of illuminate a little bit for us on this side, on this sort of particular sort of state that you sort of see, perhaps not prevalent everywhere, but certainly as quite a commonplace kind of condition that the students in your study find themselves kind of experiencing.
Yeah. So when some story happened in university spaces, maybe some students are suspended from the hostel, few other students suspended from the university on various reasons. So it was not only the students had some mistake or something, but it was intended, it was planned, strategized things of the university so that they can debarred the lit students from academic spaces. And they also targeted those who are radiant students, those who are bright and students from the Dalit community. So they picked some students, those who raised the voice, and those who claim their rights. So out of all the Dalit students, they pick some students for whom they're trapping, uh, they're putting a trap of caste or casted process. So if I just say two students from one of the hostel were suspended on some notes, it creates all the Dalit students in a traumatic position so that anxiety, panic happen to them. So they are thinking about their previous activities in which they encountered with any upper-caste faculty members, upper-caste staff members, or upper-caste students. So, and their everyday journey was in the university was only go through the panic process. So few of the students they just narrated me when they get into the university admissions. So the discussion of their admission was which quota they got into the admission, even from the counter. So one of my student they said. So the counter was open for all when they know there are some people are coming for getting to admission into reserve category, which is constitutionally legal. But the counter peoples they uh, close the shutter, the clerical counters, and so there are huge line from the reserve category students. So this type of things is always roaming around the minds of the Dalits, and it may be directly some students are leaving the hostel or the university or getting treated differently in educational spaces. When the list students raise their hand in some question raised by the teachers or the lecturers, um, so their hand raise were ignored, so they are not acknowledged by the uh, lecturer. And if sometimes they share something, so there is always a cast remark is coming towards them to their answers, even if their answer is correct, but they try to put a cast remark connecting to their answers. And in the next class or next time, the students are not um, agree or happy to answer in the class, because that the classroom is also a classroom which discuss his caste positionality rather than how he answered or what he answered. So, and when the students trying to appear their own exam also, because of Dalit should not go ahead, because upper should go and do their exam, and in their classroom also they were also asked to sit in a separate room, so which create traumatic and panic kind of things. So remembering their past stories, which is connected to caste encounters, they're thinking there may be chances of their suspensions. And suspension for the Dalit is very traumatic and very panic, because They came here not only just enjoying the atmosphere to get a ride for their occupational or educational mobility, which can help their further generations and even their families. So that create a mental and traumatic situation where the Dalits were traumatized as Tidu, Kotabala. Kotabala is a term used for the reserve category students. And I saw two students from the Dalit community. They are female students. They didn't disclose their name because if they disclose their caste name or the last name, so the people find out Dalit students from their last name. So from their last name, so they disclose their caste, and by this, they're not happy to disclose their caste because other will create problem. So other will create challenge for them, and to hide their caste, they even lose some of these benefits because sometimes they don't want to apply the scholarship and other things because in that documentation you need to disclose. To get rid of this process, few students they deprived of getting the government scholarship and few others benefits from the university. And this really creating a panic situations and create anxiety whenever they're going some places. They're thinking about class, even some event happening in their hostel premises or the premises. They're not allowed to enter that place. That create some pathetic situations for them in psychological term. In one of my case, one of the Dalit students, so he was a good player, but playing uh, cricket is okay, but leading the team is not okay for the upper-caste. So he was denied to lead despite of his talent in that field. And that sense, because every students come to the university with a hope and aspiration. When their aspiration stopped or their aspiration broken, so they are in traumatized situations and panic built on them what they need to do. So if I talk to about the exam times, so they are panicking about how they will go to the exam and how others will see them, how others will punish them. They're thinking about their punishment rather concentrating. It is not punishment, it is exactly caste punishment. So they're thinking about the caste punishment rather than concentrating their own studies.
I mean, these are really sort of profoundly difficult and challenging sort of circumstances that you're discussing here. Of course, I'm curious as well. Just sort of finally, in amongst all of this, in amongst the structural violence and the forms of exclusion and the unseen, and other forms of discrimination that you see. Did you also come across, sort of degrees of resistance, solidarity, or perhaps even sort of healing amongst Dalit students who, were sort of, pushing back in some way, or perhaps, collectivizing in some way to challenge or to cope with, the sort of circumstances which they found themselves? I'm curious to try and sort of, just sort of see if there was something a little more positive as well there as well that you sort of, saw, experienced, or witnessed.
Yeah, I saw when I was there. So few Dalit students were united against this caste discrimination. Even they started a rally or protest against the university administrations. The march till the principal office or the office of the vice chancellor. But the story is ended here that when the upper caste is dominant, and if they also wanted to protect their students. So in that case, even they invite other people outside the campus to do harsh to the Dalit students, and some people were hired to attack Dalit students. In that case, when they are protesting to their right, and even mm, in a few students, a story they are sharing that group of people from outside the campus, they came randomly and they beaten Dalit students. Few got injured, and this story, this threatened. the outside threaten, like hired threaten, like paid threaten. So they also not uh, uh, try to engage themselves directly, uh, but they are also hiring people, those who can do harm directly to the Dalit students. And in that case, one of the Dalit students was admitted in the hospital by beaten by the upper-caste peoples who were hired to do something harm to the Dalits.
Dr. Dhaneswar Bhoi, it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. You've provided a rebuttal, which is one amongst many sort of important rebuttals to the narrative that caste is something consigned to history, and very much we see these examples from across India and other parts of South Asia as well, exemplifying just how profoundly caste can still impact social relations, politics, economy, and in this case experiences of higher education and health and well-being. It's been really insightful and a deeply moving conversation. Actually, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you very much.